The morning sun filtered through the high courtroom windows, spilling across the polished wooden benches like a stage light on an unfolding drama. The low hum of whispers died as the heavy doors creaked open. Click, click. The sharp rhythm of heels echoed through the chamber, deliberate, confident, and impatient. Heads turned. An elegantly dressed woman strode in, her chin high, her expression caught somewhere between irritation and defiance. She wasn't here to seek justice. She was here to get it over with. Judge Caprio, seated with his familiar calm, looked up from the file before him. His glasses slid slightly down his nose as he observed her approach. He didn't say a word, just studied her movements, the way she tossed her purse onto the defense table, the faint sigh she gave as if the courtroom itself had inconvenienced her. The clerk glanced toward the judge, uncertain whether to continue the docket. Caprio gave a subtle nod. "Good morning," the judge said, voice steady and kind, the same tone he'd used 1,000 times before, a tone that usually softened even the most nervous visitors. The woman didn't respond. She adjusted her jacket instead, her eyes fixed on her phone screen, scrolling, pretending not to hear. The silence stretched, long enough for everyone to feel it. Caprio's expression didn't change. He leaned back slightly, his hands folding gently on the bench. "I said, 'Good morning,'" he repeated, quieter now, but carrying more weight. Finally, she looked up, meeting his eyes with a faint smirk. "Yeah," she muttered. "Morning." Her words floated in the air, sharp, cold. A few people in the gallery exchanged glances, sensing tension building. Judge Caprio smiled faintly, almost amused, as if to himself. "Well," he said, tapping the edge of the file with his pen, "we'll see what kind of morning it turns out to be." The woman sighed audibly, crossing her legs, her impatience plain. Caprio's gaze softened again, not with frustration, but a quiet curiosity. He'd seen arrogance before. Often, beneath it, there was something else. Fear, pain, exhaustion. He wondered which one she carried today. The courtroom clock ticked. The air felt still. And as the clerk began to read her citation aloud, Caprio's attention stayed on her face, watching, waiting, sensing that this was only the beginning of a story neither of them expected. The clerk's voice echoed in the quiet courtroom. Case number 1457, violation of city parking ordinance. Vehicle found in a restricted zone on Atwells Avenue. The woman shifted in her seat, exhaling loudly, eyes rolling toward the ceiling as if the air itself had inconvenienced her. Judge Caprio glanced up briefly, then back to the file. He noticed everything, the tapping of her fingers, the quick, dismissive sighs, the way she leaned back as though the entire proceeding was beneath her. Before the clerk could finish, she interrupted, her tone sharp. "You don't have to read all that," she said. "I know why I'm here. It's ridiculous." A few murmurs rippled through the room. Caprio's gaze lifted again, calm but steady. "Go ahead," he said gently, motioning for the clerk to continue. The woman scoffed, folding her arms. "I'm serious, Your Honor. I don't have time for this nonsense. I was 5 minutes late, and they're making me come to court over that." Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "Ma'am, I promise we'll get through this quickly, but let's make sure we understand the facts first." She laughed, short, humorless. "Facts? The fact is, this city just loves to take people's money." The room stiffened. Even the bailiff's posture changed. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. His eyes softened, not with irritation, but with that quiet patience he'd earned over decades. "I see," he said, pausing. "You feel this is unfair." She shrugged, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Of course it's unfair. You think I wanted to waste my morning here? I have a business to run. I pay my taxes. I'm not some criminal." Caprio nodded thoughtfully, letting the silence stretch. The woman's words hung in the air, sharp edges softening in the stillness. He spoke with calm conviction. "No one here thinks you're a criminal, ma'am. We're just here to sort this out with a little respect." The word respect seemed to hang there, heavy and deliberate. She broke eye contact, muttering something under her breath. "Whatever. This whole system is a joke." A collective breath left the courtroom. Caprio didn't react. He simply folded his hands and watched her turn away, her back stiff, defiant. The air between them shifted, tension mixed with something unspoken, something deeper. And though she didn't know it yet, the lesson had already begun. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to feel. The woman's chair screeched against the tile as she pushed it back with sudden force. She grabbed her handbag, her movements sharp and deliberate, the sound of rustling fabric filling the silence. "I'm done," she snapped, standing tall. "This is a waste of time." Her voice, dripping with contempt, echoed through the chamber. Gasps rippled from the gallery. A few heads turned. Others looked down, unsure if they should even breathe. Judge Caprio didn't move. He simply watched her, hands folded, eyes calm behind his glasses. His tone, when he finally spoke, was almost tender. "Ma'am," he began, but she was already walking. The click of her heels grew faster, angrier, bouncing off the marble walls like gunfire. The bailiff instinctively stepped forward, his arm rising as if to stop her. Caprio lifted his hand ever so slightly. "Let her go," he said softly. His words cut through the stillness like a whisper of mercy. Everyone froze. The woman reached the door, yanked. It opened and stepped into the hallway, her silhouette framed against the bright morning light. The heavy door slammed behind her, rattling the old courtroom walls. For a moment, all that remained was the echo. Caprio leaned back in his chair, his gaze following the empty space she had left behind. He exhaled slowly, almost to himself. "Sometimes," he said, voice low, "you have to let people walk away to find their own reflection." His words weren't meant for the record. They were meant for the human heart. The courtroom was utterly silent now. Even the air felt reverent. A woman in the back row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The clerk lowered her head, moved by the unexpected stillness that followed. Caprio sat quietly, his expression unreadable. Not angry, not disappointed, just thoughtful. He glanced at the door again. A faint smile crossed his face, the kind that comes from wisdom, not amusement. He'd seen tempers flare before, but he knew that pride was often just a disguise for pain. "We'll wait a moment," he murmured, setting his pen down gently. And just as the courtroom began to breathe again, a soft creak broke the silence. The door, the same one that had slammed moments ago, began to open. Slowly, hesitantly, all eyes turned toward it as light poured back in, painting a hopeful glow across the floor. The door creaked open slowly, like the first breath after a storm. All eyes turned as the woman stepped back inside. The confidence that once defined her stride was gone, replaced by hesitation. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and searching. For a moment, she stood frozen near the doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. I left my car keys," she stammered, her tone stripped of defiance. Judge Caprio didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her, his expression soft, kind, the kind of stillness that commands respect without asking for it. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe that's not all you left behind," he said gently. The words landed with unexpected weight. The courtroom seemed to exhale, the tension easing into something warmer, quieter. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I didn't mean to," she began, then stopped, her voice faltering. The judge tilted his head slightly, waiting, not pressing. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding the people watching, and then finally returned to his. "I wasn't expecting," she murmured, "for you to be so calm about it." Caprio chuckled softly, his tone disarming. "I've been doing this a long time, ma'am. If I lost my peace every time someone walked out on me, I wouldn't have any left." A few quiet laughs escaped from the gallery, not mockery, just shared humanity. She hesitated by the defense table, clutching her handbag. "Do you mind if I sit?" "Please," Caprio said, motioning to the chair she'd abandoned minutes earlier. "It's still yours." Her movements were slower this time, deliberate. She lowered herself into the chair, like someone unsure if they still belonged there. The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It was reflective. Caprio leaned forward, resting his forearms on the bench. "You know," he said softly, "anger can take you places you don't really want to go. But humility, that brings you home." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I just didn't expect you to be kind," she said, the words trembling out like a confession. Caprio smiled again, that same patient warmth radiating through the courtroom. "Well," he said, almost like a father speaking to a child who'd learned something the hard way, "kindness costs a lot less than anger." Her shoulders dropped as if a weight had lifted. For the first time since she'd entered that morning, she didn't look ready to run. She just sat there, quiet, present, as if seeing the courtroom and herself with new eyes. Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward, the faint hum of the courtroom lights filling the space between words. "Tell me," he said, his voice gentle but steady, "how's your morning been so far?" The woman blinked, surprised. She wasn't expecting conversation, especially not kindness. Her shoulders dropped just a little. "Honestly," she murmured, her eyes darting toward the floor. "Terrible." He nodded, as if he already knew. "Rough morning." She gave a small, shaky laugh. "Rough month." Her hands twisted in her lap. "Actually, rough year." Caprio folded his hands together, his tone patient. "I've been doing this long enough to know that people rarely end up in my courtroom because of a parking ticket. Usually something else brought them here first. So, what's been weighing on you?" Her eyes glistened. "I've just been tired. Everything feels heavy." She paused, searching for words that didn't make her sound weak. "I lost my dad 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. I've been trying to keep it together. Work, family, bills. But it's like everything keeps asking for more, and I've got nothing left to give." The room grew still, as though even the walls were listening. A few people in the back shifted uncomfortably, not from impatience, but from empathy. The woman wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to snap earlier," she whispered. I can't handle one more thing going wrong." Caprio's expression softened. "You know," he said quietly, "when people are hurting, it often looks like anger to everyone else, but it's really just pain that doesn't know where to go." She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time without defensiveness. "You really believe that?" "I've seen it," he replied. "Many times." He leaned back slightly, adjusting his glasses. "My father used to say, the way people treat you is their story. The way you respond is yours." Her lips trembled as she exhaled. "I think I forgot how to respond with grace." Caprio gave her a small, knowing smile. "Then, maybe today's your reminder." A pause hung between them, not awkward, just meaningful. The light from the window caught his face as he studied her for a moment longer. Then softly he said, "You remind me of someone very dear to me." The woman blinked, unsure what to say next, as his words lingered like the opening of a door she didn't know existed. For a long moment, Judge Caprio said nothing. His hands rested on the bench, fingers gently interlaced, his gaze distant, not lost, but remembering. Then he exhaled, a breath that seemed to soften the air itself. "You know," he began quietly, "I had a father who taught me more about patience than any law book ever could." The courtroom, once a space of rules and records, began to feel smaller, almost intimate, like a family room where stories were sacred. The woman looked up, curiosity flickering through her tears. Caprio smiled faintly, eyes soft behind his glasses. "My father was a milkman," he said. "Every morning before sunrise, he'd deliver bottles door to door. I used to ride with him sometimes. It was cold, hard work, but he never complained. Not once." His voice grew gentle, rhythmic, like a man painting with memory. He'd say, "Son, life will hand you things that don't feel fair, but how you carry them, that's what defines you." The woman's expression wavered, her lips parting slightly as though she could feel that same cold morning air. "He sounds like a good man," she whispered. "He was." Caprio nodded. "One of the best. He didn't have much, not money, not comfort. But he had something far more valuable: humility. He treated everyone with the same respect. Whether it was a judge, a janitor, or a child playing in the street, he saw them all the same." Her eyes glistened again, her earlier defiance long gone. The judge's words filled the room like warmth spreading through winter air. "I'll tell you something," Caprio continued, voice trembling slightly. "When I lost him, I didn't just lose my father. I lost my compass for a while. The world felt heavier, but every time I wanted to snap at someone or lose my patience, I'd hear his voice. 'Be kind, Frank. You never know what battles they're fighting.'" The woman's hand went to her mouth as her emotions finally broke through. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk lowered her eyes, moved by the quiet weight of the moment. Caprio leaned forward, the corners of his mouth turning up in that familiar, fatherly smile. "I think your father would want you to show kindness today," he said softly. "Not because the world deserves it, but because you do." The woman nodded slowly, unable to speak. The judge's words didn't. Just fill the room. They filled her heart, like light finally finding its way through a cracked door. The woman sat quietly, her hands clasped in front of her like a child caught between guilt and gratitude. The courtroom was still. That deep, breathless kind of silence that only happens when hearts are open. Judge Caprio looked down at the paperwork before him, though his attention was elsewhere. When he finally lifted his eyes, they met hers with a calm patience that felt almost like forgiveness. "Do you have anything you'd like to say before I make my decision?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She swallowed, her throat tightening. Then, with a trembling breath, she managed, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I was rude. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way." Her voice cracked on the last word. "You didn't deserve that." Caprio nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging not just her apology, but the courage it took to give it. "It takes strength to admit when we're wrong," he said. "More strength than most people ever find." She wiped at her eyes, a shaky smile flickering through tears. I didn't know how to handle everything." "And you were kind when you didn't have to be." Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice tender but steady. "Ma'am, this courtroom isn't just about fines and tickets. It's about people. We all stumble. We all fall short. What matters is that we find our way back with humility." He paused, glancing down at her citation, then back up again. "Your father raised you to be strong, didn't he?" Her eyes filled instantly. She nodded. "He did." Caprio smiled. "Then let's honor that strength the right way." He tapped the edge of the paper once, then set it aside. "The court is going to dismiss this case, not because you deserve pity, but because you've already learned the greater lesson." A soft wave of murmurs and quiet clapping spread through the courtroom. Even the bailiff smiled, his stern demeanor briefly melting. The woman pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed, whispering, "Thank you, Your Honor, truly." Caprio gave a small chuckle, eyes twinkling with warmth. "Don't thank me," he said gently. "Go make him proud." Her breath caught. The words hit deep, not as judgment, but as permission to heal. She nodded, tears slipping freely now, and the courtroom seemed to glow a little brighter, the kind of light that only forgiveness can bring. The sound of the courtroom door closing lingered like an echo of change. Judge Caprio sat still for a moment, watching the space where the woman had stood. No longer the proud, impatient stranger who had walked in that morning, but someone lighter, freer. The clerk quietly stacked papers, and the murmur of the next case faded into respectful silence. It was in these pauses, these breaths between judgments, that the judge often found the deepest truths. He adjusted his glasses and looked toward the small audience, his tone shifting. Not official, not procedural, but deeply human. "You know," he began softly, "we all carry battles no one can see." His words seemed to hang in the air, reaching every corner of the room. Sometimes people don't need punishment. They need patience. A montage unfolded in the quiet. The bailiff, once stoic, now smiling faintly. A young man in the back wiping his eyes. The clerk pausing her pen mid-scribble. Even the hum of the old ceiling fan felt gentler. The courtroom wasn't just a place of law anymore. It was a place of life, a space where compassion and justice met like two old friends shaking hands. Caprio leaned back in his chair, his gaze unfocused as he spoke. Part reflection, part confession. "When I was a boy," he said, "I thought justice was about being right. But years teach you something different. Justice isn't about winning or losing. It's about understanding, about finding a way to lift someone instead of breaking them." The light through the windows shifted, painting golden stripes across the judge's bench. His voice lowered to a near whisper. "That woman, she came in angry, and she left lighter, not because we erased her mistake, but because we chose to see her heart instead of her attitude. That's what mercy looks like." He paused, the faintest smile touching his face as he gathered his notes. "And maybe," he said, glancing toward the camera, "that's what her father would have wanted." His eyes softened again, filled with the quiet wisdom of years spent balancing fairness and humanity. The clerk looked up, and for a moment, no one moved. The camera lingered on Caprio's face, Kind, worn, peaceful, his next words carried the gentle finality of truth. "Justice," he said slowly, "isn't about the law alone. It's about the heart behind it." The gavel never struck. Instead, the screen faded to black as soft piano music swelled, the sound of grace echoing long after the scene ended.